the tour made a decision that to renege on what they promised when the players left for LIV. I thought that the LIV players, when they left, they were supposed to be banned for life.
He's gutless. Not the kind of thing you expect from an 8-time major champion. But Tom Watson did not hold back. He named 4 men he says betrayed the game. Phil Mickelson, Brooks Koepka, Patrick Reed, Greg Norman. Watson looked straight at the camera of public opinion and called them all out. And the story behind each name will change how you see professional golf forever. Golf was not always about the money. Once upon a time, it ran on something older and much harder to replace. Honor, sacrifice, accountability. An unwritten deal held the whole sport together. And for generations, every player walked into that deal with their eyes wide open. If this kind of honest, straight-talking golf content is what you came here for, use the height feature right now and give this video some height while we roll. Because Watson is swinging hard, and we are about to break every hit down. Every morning, a young pro woke up, drove 3 hours to a Korn Ferry event, played his heart out, missed the cut, and drove home in silence. He was paying a debt to the game. Nobody handed him anything. He fought for every dollar, every ranking point, every invitation to compete at the level he had dreamed about as a kid. And when he finally reached the top of that ladder, the weight of what it had cost him was exactly what made it mean something. That is the deal golf offered. A stage in return for loyalty, a prize in return for struggle, merit above everything else, always. The fans understood it, the sponsors believed in it, the young players coming up through the ranks accepted it without question. You did not inherit a place in this sport, you earned it. You showed the game what you were made of, and the game showed you back. Tom Watson is the living proof that deal was worth taking. 8 major championships, 5 open titles, a career built entirely on grit. He has spoken publicly about a 7-year stretch of grinding without a major breakthrough before his moment arrived on a practice tee. He never demanded a guaranteed check. He never looked for a shortcut. He earned every title through the PGA Tour's unforgiving meritocracy, where you had to prove your worth all over again every single week. No safety net, no free ride. Just golf in its purest form. So, when Watson talks about what players owe the game and what the game owes its players, the weight behind those words is not opinion. It is a lifetime of earned credibility. And in the spring of 2026, around the Masters at Augusta, Watson's patience finally snapped. He watched LIV defectors return to the PGA Tour through reinstatement programs he considered far too lenient. He watched the institution he had spent his career defending bend over backwards to accommodate the very people he believed had broken it. He decided he was done staying quiet. He opened his mouth and let the world know exactly where he stood. 4 betrayals. 4 different ways the soul of professional golf had been chipped away, piece by piece. We are counting them down today, starting at number 4 and finishing at number 1. The betrayal Watson says stings most of all. Number 4, Patrick Reed. Patrick Reed made a calculation. LIV Golf offered him a number large enough to walk away from everything the PGA Tour had given him. The sponsors who backed the events he had won. The players who depended on the commercial ecosystem that star names helped sustain. The unwritten conflicting event rule that had always required players to seek permission before competing elsewhere. Reed did not seek permission. He did not pause to weigh what his departure would cost the people below him on the ladder. He took the money and walked out the door. Tom Watson's frustration with Reed comes down to economics. Golf runs on sponsorship. Brands invest millions into tour events because they are guaranteed the presence of high-profile names. When a name like Reed abandons that deal without going through the proper channels, the trust that holds the entire financial model together cracks. Watson calls sponsor protection the #1 rule of professional golf. Not a guideline, the foundation. Violate that foundation and you are not just causing a commercial inconvenience. You are pulling the floor out from under every young player on the circuit below you who has never heard of a guaranteed contract because he has spent every week simply trying to keep his card. Watson's verdict on Reed is clean and cold. They made their decision based on financial incentives and should live with the consequences. That is the full statement. No softening, no nuance offered. You chose the money over the institution that built your name. Now you carry that choice wherever you go. Watson believed that Reed's return to the tour should have been a non-starter in spirit because there is no reinstatement process that can undo the erosion of commercial trust that happens when a star abandons the people who financed his stage. Number 3, Brooks Koepka. Koepka is a 5-time major champion, one of the most recognizable names in professional golf. And his story is, in many ways, more maddening to Watson than Reed's, because of what the PGA Tour did after he left. When Live Golf launched and players began signing, the tour sent a clear message to those who chose to stay. Defectors would be banned for life. That was the communicated position. Watson heard it. The players who turned down enormous guaranteed contracts to stay loyal heard it. They made real sacrifices on the back of that promise. They chose the tour's meritocracy, its heritage, its stated moral values, over the Saudi money. They trusted the institution to back them up. They were not repaid with the same loyalty they gave. In January of 2026, Koepka returned to the PGA Tour through the returning member program. He paid a £5 million fine, accepted a 5-year equity ban, and was reinstated. Watson's response was sharply worded and unambiguous. He said he thought the Live players, when they left, they were supposed to be banned for life. That is not exaggeration. That is a man holding the institution accountable for a specific commitment it made and then reversed under financial pressure. The fine is what cuts Watson most deeply. $5 million sounds significant in isolation. Measured against the total Live earnings Koepka accumulated during his time away, it represents a rounding error on his overall windfall. He paid a small portion of his Saudi money to walk back through a door that the tour had publicly stated would be sealed forever. The players who stayed loyal to the tour gave up the guaranteed money entirely. They received nothing for that sacrifice, except the quiet knowledge that it ultimately was not required. Watson cannot move past that contradiction. His proposed remedy has a particular kind of poetic justice to it. Make returning players compete on the Corn Ferry Tour for a full year before stepping back onto the main circuit. Force them to earn it again. Make them feel what the ladder feels like from near the bottom, the way every young professional on tour has always had to. Struggle was the defining quality of the PGA Tour's model. Allowing defectors to buy their way straight back to the top undermines that quality at the root. Number 2, Greg Norman. Reed and Koepka represent players who took a deal that fractured commercial trust. Greg Norman represents something larger, more calculated, and far more damaging to the architecture of the sport. Norman did not simply join a rival tour. Norman built it. He became the face and the engine of the most disruptive force professional golf had ever confronted. And Watson's judgment of that role goes well beyond a standard disagreement about business decisions. Watson has been sounding the alarm about breakaway league proposals for years, drawing parallels to a similar idea that surfaced in the 1970s and was ultimately shelved. His argument against that concept was the same one he would deploy decades later. A league that trades the meritocratic rewards of competitive golf for upfront guaranteed money does not grow the sport. It hollows it out from the inside. When you remove the necessity to fight for every result, you remove the fire that the game was designed to test. That fire is not an optional feature of professional golf. It is what makes the victories mean anything at all. Watson's warning about Live Golf was unambiguous. He said a breakaway golf league funded by Saudi Arabia's sovereign investment fund would damage the game hugely. Small fields with guaranteed prize pools, no cut pressure, no survival stakes. A global talent pool split between two competing circuits with incompatible values. Watson saw every one of those outcomes as structural damage that would take years to undo. But Watson's concern runs deeper than the format. He sees the entire Live project through the lens of sports washing. A foreign government with a deeply controversial record on human rights, using the prestige and heritage of a beloved sport to polish its image on the world stage. Norman walked willingly into that frontman role. He became the public face of that effort and the most visible argument for its legitimacy. For Watson, that complicity goes beyond a commercial calculation. It is a compromise of the game's integrity that no rebrand and no expanded field size can fix. Norman's counterposition throughout this saga was that players are independent contractors with the freedom to compete wherever they choose, and that the tour's bans were nothing more than institutional bullying. Watson rejects that framing in its entirety. Freedom and responsibility are not separate ideas in his world. Players carry the reputation of the sport every time they tee it up in front of a camera. They are stewards, not free agents. Norman built his playing career on the very institutions he then tried to pull apart. The betrayal, in Watson's view, is not just of the PGA Tour. It is of every player, sponsor, and fan who trusted those institutions to still be there tomorrow. Number 1, Phil Mickelson. And here we arrive at the top of the list. The number 1 betrayal in Watson's reckoning. Not the man who constructed the rival league. Not the stars who cashed out their cards and came back with a check. The man who broke the culture. Phil Mickelson. And it all goes back to a press conference in Scotland in 2014. September of that year. The Ryder Cup at Gleneagles. Watson is the captain of the United States team. The Americans lose 16.5 points to 11.5. It is a heavy, painful defeat. Locker rooms after a result like that are quiet, serious places. And there is a code that has always governed what comes next. Grievances are aired privately. Disagreements with the captain are handled behind closed doors. Whatever frustrations accumulated during the week, they are dealt with inside the walls of the locker room, not outside in front of cameras and journalists. That code is not written down anywhere. It does not need to be. It is the backbone of every team sport that has ever existed. Mickelson broke every part of it. At the post-match press conference, with Watson sitting just a few feet away, Mickelson rose and publicly dismantled his captain's approach to the week. He lamented the decision to move away from Paul Azinger's pod system, the team structure used successfully in 2008, that Mickelson argued was the only formula that had actually worked for American Ryder Cup teams in recent memory. He laid out his critique on camera in a live forum to the assembled press, while Watson sat right beside him. The wider golfing world described it as unedifying. They called it pure disrespect for a legend. Both of those descriptions were accurate. Watson kept his composure in the moment. He said he had made the very best decisions available to him based on the information he and his vice captains had at the time. He did not fire back publicly. He held himself with the dignity the situation required of him. But nearly a year later, at St. Andrews for his farewell Open Championship appearance, Watson finally delivered his full, honest verdict. He called it sour grapes. He said Phil was very disappointed about not being able to play, having been left out of both Saturday sessions at Gleneagles. That personal frustration, Watson said, was the true engine behind the public attack, not genuine concern for the team's welfare, not a principled push for systemic improvement. Personal disappointment dressed up in the language of tactical wisdom. Watson does not rank this at number 1 because it cost the most money or generated the most headlines. He ranks it at number 1 because it was the first crack, the crack that everything else followed through. The direct fallout from Gleneagles was the creation of the Ryder Cup Task Force, a body formed specifically because a player had publicly challenged the captain's authority. The players had dictated terms to the institution. And while the United States did win in 2016, Watson's deeper point stands. A system where the talent gets to override the leadership is a system that is already broken. You can win a Ryder Cup with that model and still lose something larger. When Mickelson stood at that press conference and threw a legend of the game under the bus in real time on live television, he sent an unmistakable signal to every player watching. The institutions of this sport are no longer above criticism from individuals. The locker room no longer has walls that matter. A player's personal feelings carry more weight than the traditions that held this game together for a century. Watson believes that player-first mentality became the exact cultural runway that led to defections, to breakaway leagues, to guaranteed contracts, to all of it. The cultural fracture at Gleneagles in 2014 did not invent the live era alone, but in Watson's reckoning, it opened the door that let it in. Watson's indictment does not stop at the 4 names. In June 2023, he wrote an open letter to PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan that exposed a deeper institutional betrayal running underneath everything else. For 3 years, tour leadership had pointed to the Saudi human rights record and the kingdom's alleged ties to the September 11th attacks as the central moral reason for players to reject live golf. Watson, who publicly aligned himself with the September 11th families, took that moral argument at face value. He called it a non-negotiable position. Then the tour began negotiating a partnership with the very same fund it had condemned. Watson asked Monahan directly how the tour planned to face those families after that reversal. The players who stayed did so partly because they believed in the ground they were standing on. By folding under financial pressure, the leadership betrayed every one of them. 4 betrayals, 1 sport, 1 reckoning that has been building for over a decade. Mickelson broke the culture that protected the locker room and the legends inside it. Norman tried to break the structure that held the global game together. Koepka and Reed broke the commercial trust that sponsors rely on to put their money in year after year. And the tour's own leadership broke the promise it made to the players who chose loyalty over profit. Watson connects all 4 into a single warning. When money replaces merit as the sport's primary value, everyone loses. The fans lose. The young players grinding at the bottom of the ladder lose. The whole institution loses. But Watson has not given up on golf. He is too invested in what this sport can still be to write it off. He believes the game is bigger than the damage that has been done. What he is asking for is accountability. Real consequences for people who broke real promises. A Corn Ferry grind for anyone who wants their card back through effort rather than a check. A leadership that means what it says and does not quietly reverse that position the moment a big number appears on the table. A locker room code that means something again. If those things return, professional golf can protect the soul that makes it worth watching. The struggle, the merit, the unwritten deal between a player and the game that gave him everything he has. The sport does not need to be perfect to survive. It just needs to be honest. And right now, Watson is trying to make it so. Watson spent a lifetime earning the right to say all of this out loud and on record. He is using that right now and doing it at a moment when the sport needs someone to say it. Let us know in the comments whether you think he is right. Did these 4 betray professional golf? Should the consequences have been harder? And if this is the kind of deep, honest content you want more of, hit subscribe and stay with us. The conversation around this great sport is far from finished.